Let's begin. We're going to move to item 2.5, our 2013-14 capital outlay projects. Fred Harris, welcome.
Good morning, board members. How are you this morning? Good morning. I'm not sure if I wore enough sunblock for the lights in here. We'll see. We've got before you two items, our annual rites of passage for capital outlay before the board. Our first is item 2.5 is the annual capital outlay plan, which incorporates 82 projects for the fiscal year 2013-14. And then the second is our 5-year capital outlay plan, but I'll wait for that. In terms of before you is a budget plan for consideration in the next year's governor's budget for 82 projects in terms of, and these are all new start projects totaling $358 million and for an out year cost, a total cost of $1.3 billion. They would all be dependent on a new state bond being passed, and I'm forever hopeful but also realistic. As you can see, I'm wearing my cash pin for a 2012 state bond, but the likelihood for a 2012 state bond is even for the betting person for great odds is not necessarily going to happen this particular year. So you may ask yourself, why do a 13-14 plan? It's important to be able to have something out there in terms of a statement of both of our needs structured in a way that represents that on a project by project basis, because one, you never know when resources and opportunities can arise either from the federal government or through the state government in a wildest possible sense. But more importantly, it's useful if not only if there's a bond, but it's useful as an advocacy piece for the development of the next bond. So I've put it forward to you in that particular regard. We haven't had a bond since 2006, and it's been waiting, but we're very hopeful for the 2014 fiscal year, and this is building towards that. I also would share with you that there is a piece of legislation that's moving. It's moved through the Assembly. It's AB 2164. It's now in the Senate Education Committee. It will be heard next week. It's Mr. Dickinson's bill, which is sponsored by districts proposing to allow on a 5-year limited term basis, it's a 5-year sunset clause, to allow for districts, once the Board of Governors approves a plan and it goes through the normal process through the administration, to start the projects even before a bond is passed. The idea is to take advantage of this particular bidding market, which is quite beneficial, but also to generate the jobs not only for the projects themselves, but also to meet the facilities needs of districts. And it allows districts then to be eligible for reimbursement on a next bond. I know this is not meant to be a legislative discussion, but I'd throw that out there as one more reason for events like that were to occur, to have a 13-14 plan in place, because that would be the plan that would be in consideration for that kind of funding mechanism. That's not a new precedential way of doing funding projects. K-12 has that authority in some form or fashion. Also, I understand it's done through the Transportation Commission. So, cross your fingers. I think there'll be a little bit of rough sledding through the Senate Education Committee. We look forward to help in terms of getting that thought. I've heard some kind of noise that, well, K-12 is, this is at the staff level, K-12 is basically mandatory and higher education is not. Therefore, why should we give that authority to you? But I submit to you that we meet a particular beneficial need in the education system, as you all well know. So, first of all, what you have is several attachments, but attachment D is the action item before you that has 82 projects. These are all new start projects. These would only move forward if and when the bond were to be made available. And I ask for your approval.
I'll let board members ask questions, but quickly, two things, Fred. One, none of these 82 projects will go forward unless there's a state bond.
Would not be funded.
Not one would be funded, and the bill that you mentioned, Dickinson's bill, would allow a district to move forward with a building project, but on their own dime, so to speak, and they would be taking the risk that the state may or may not reimburse their costs, or a portion of those costs.
That's correct.
Got it.
And districts currently have to sign a letter of risk for any state-funded project for all the funds that we've had to date to spend, only because of the vagaries of the bond market and the sales, and the administration's basic required districts to sign a letter that if or when bonds were to not appear, that they would take total risk. So that risk is not anything new. It's just a little bit elongated here to take advantage of this current interim situation.
Okay. Questions by board members?
Not a question, but just a comment. I can see from the district perspective the temptation, if you will, to move ahead based on what might happen in 2013 and 14. And I just think it behooves us as a board, given that we have responsibility for the system as a whole, to make very explicit from the position of this board that what you stated previously, that this is a risk. Be very, very careful as you assume it, that there is absolutely no guarantee of a bond in 2013 and 14, and there is zero capacity of the state to bail you out of a situation that might be created. I think we have a responsibility to do something that is very strong in that regard, because I can understand, again, repeating myself, from the district perspective, how tempting it would be to go forward and maybe make commitments that could extend a little beyond what resources you have available to you.
So maybe based on that, Vice Chancellor Garcia, has the Chancellor's office taken a position on that particular bill, on the Dickinson bill?
Yes, we have. We're supporting it.
We are supporting it. Okay. Chancellor Scott.
I just wanted to make a historical comment, having been around about as long as anybody. I want to compliment the Chancellor's office, and this occurred prior to my arrival, of really establishing a very strict formula of how projects are funded. Because there was a day, maybe 15 years ago or so, when sometime there would be maneuvering going on by legislators to get a certain project moved ahead, and there would be special bills that would be generated. And I never sought that, because I thought that was a very poor way to fund capital projects. But fortunately, as a result of careful planning and an exacting formula, now that doesn't happen, and people understand exactly what the criteria is for statewide funding of projects. And that's now obviously something else that has intervened in the period is that the local level bonding funding could occur with, rather than a 67% level, 55%. And as was pointed out here, since that time, $23.5 billion has been passed in local bonds. So that's quite impressive. But I think Board Member McDougall's warning is certainly in order. I heard just the other day of a district that had gotten itself in trouble because they thought they were going to pass a local bond, and they didn't. And they spent some of that proposed money. And, it's kind of like personal finance. You don't spend a raise till it's in your pocket. And so we will underline the fact that districts, particularly in these very perilous economic times, many of our districts their reserves have been greatly depleted as a result of the loss of funding. Last 3 years, we have a 12% loss of funding. It's not just we didn't get a COLA, we got a minus 12%. So, and of course, unless the tax initiative passes, and I'm sure that Vice Chancellor Troy will go into greater detail, But unless the tax initiative passes in November, we're slated for a $280 million additional cut in 12-13. So I just want you to know that this particular way of doing it is far superior to what had existed in the past.
Member Baum.
Question though, too. I saw that there is 10 million in Category A projects. That's where public safety is at stake too. So what are the alternatives for those districts that have these projects that are needed for safety issues?
To fund them locally, that would be one option, of course. From a state perspective, basically, as the bidding market still remains beneficial, and we have reversions on projects that we cobbled together money from bid savings and what have you. That's how we funded the one project that's in the 11-12 budget, was from bid savings and the reversions.
I see. So you can take projects that we've approved, and if they come in for less, that those funds can then be reallocated.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah, they go back into the bond fund because they can't be spent for operation either at the state or the local level, and they're used for another project. That's how we've been funding the last 2 years, actually, worth of projects. The 3 or 4 projects the previous year, and the one project proposed in for 12-13.
Well, my compliments to your team to find ways to stretch those bond funds as far as they can go.
Believe me, they're very clever and very hardworking in terms of keeping the cats all marching in the same direction.
Now, one question: if we approve this, but then a bond doesn't happen within the time frame, if a bond then is passed in 2015, can it be retroactively? Can those funds be retroactively used for some of these projects?
It would be depending on how the budget items, again, we're envisioning this to be going into a budget bill or a piece of legislation. And as it has been done in past years, where you have like a budget in the summer and usually a bond act in November, there's a fund number that's usually assigned, because we envision this being structured in a legislative vehicle and getting a legislative scope and cost established. And so if that bond fund number was for a 2014 bond, then that would require it to go back through the legislative process again, if that's structured that particular way.
Thank you. I have no questions.
I'd like to move approval of the action item.
Moved by Member McDougal, seconded by Member Izumi. All in,
I have a question.
Member Malliman.
I'm just kind of thinking about if a district chooses to start a project without bond funding, and it is determined when bond funding does appear that it was a lower priority project and we might not have funded it in our first tier of funding, what is their recourse? Are they going to come to our board asking us to give some kind of appeal process for that?
Well, that'll be part of the letter that we'll have in red letters and bold type that basically says you take a risk unless and until the funds occur and appear. And so, we basically have a $1.3 billion total plan based before you now based on total cost. And let's just say we don't get $1.3 billion in the total bond. These projects are prioritized by points, and those projects that, till we run out of funding in each category, that's what we would move forward.
So if I'm starting a project on my campus, I know I'm in that bottom third, let's say, when I'm starting it. So that means when that funding comes in, it will be in the bottom third of the funding.
Right, and again, what I'm explaining is basically the normal process. I would envision under, kind of projecting here, not really having thinking that's all the way through, but for under an AB 2164, that if there was another, let's just say there's a 2014 bond and this is a 5-year sunset date to 2018 that's in the legislation. And so if they didn't make it in the 2014 bond, then they would have call to seek reimbursement in the next bond if it was before 2018, under that scenario.
Okay, thank you.
But we look forward to any support and through the Senate Education Committee for getting that bill passed.
Chancellor Scott.
I guess I would say I don't recommend funding folly. So, if somebody is foolish enough to stick their neck out and not be approved, then of course they would have to pay the consequences. The only thing that ever happens, I'll remind you, it's happened in a few instances in community colleges. If a community college district goes bankrupt, It then seeks a loan from the legislature, which in these difficult times might be a little hard to get. And if they get that loan, then the local board of trustees loses its power, and a special trustee is appointed by this office, which in turn oversees all the finances of that particular district. So these are, those are the kind of difficulties that one faces when a board, and we just have, I have great sympathy for all of our community college districts because of this round of cuts. And we are carefully monitoring all these districts. And we have to say that some of them are getting closer and closer to that fine line between solvency and insolvency.
We have a motion to approve by Member McDougall, a second by Member Izumi. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.